You're listening to In Your Pants with Dr. Susie G, the physiotherapist for your private, helping you get in the know down below.
Hey guys, it's Dr. Susie G here, and welcome to another In Your Pants podcast episode. I'm so glad that you can be here with us today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about yoga, what yoga is, what it isn't, how you can apply the practices of yoga on the mat and also off the mat in your life to enhance your overall well-being and experience on this planet. And to help me do this, I've invited a very special guest and a really wonderful friend of mine. I love her dearly. Her name is Shelley Prosco. Shelley is a physiotherapist, a yoga therapist, and the pioneer of physio yoga. She's an educator with over 20 years of experience in working with people in pain. She is a pain care U trainer, teaches in physiotherapy and yoga programs. She presents at international conferences, contributes to academic research and writing, and offers on-site and online courses for yoga and health professionals. Shelley is the co-editor of Yoga and Science in Pain Care, Treating the Person in Pain, and maintains a clinical practice in Sylvan Lake, Canada. This is such an awesome episode, you guys. Shelley is actually going to take us through a mindfulness meditation practice. So hopefully you're not driving doing it. Probably would advise to do this when you are in a safe and steady space. But definitely pause and rewind to go back to that, because that is certainly a gem. And I'm so grateful for Shelley and her wisdom today on the show. So I hope you enjoy it just as much as I did. And without further ado, let's get to it. Hi, Shelley. Thank you so much for being on the In Your Pants podcast today with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. Here we go.
I know. For all the listeners and those watching, can you explain a little bit about who you are, your passions, and what you do?
Okay, so I am a physical therapist. I'm a yoga therapist. I do some education. I help to educate yoga professionals and healthcare providers on how to integrate yoga into physical therapy. I also have a clinical practice. I've been integrating yoga into my PT practice for over 20 years. And let's see, what else can I tell you? I have some specialties. So I'm really passionate about helping people who are living with persistent or chronic pain. And I also enjoy helping healthcare professionals who are going through burnout or want to try to prevent burnout. And of course, as you know, I'm really passionate about helping people with pelvic health issues. And mostly, like the last few years, it's been people that live with persistent pelvic pain.
Right. Yeah. And let's segue into that, because I just finished, and maybe some of my followers know this too, but I just finished a 200-hour yoga teacher training, which is 3 weeks long, 10-hour days. And I think there's a lot of stigma and stereotype around what yoga is. So I think that would be a good place to start of, let's just define, what yoga is and what it isn't.
Okay. Well, let's do that together. You can chime in too. So, it's funny, Susie, when I first started answering this question, years ago, I had this spiel, yoga is a life science. It's a system of health that helps to, promote physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, overall health. And the word yoga means to unite or to yoke, body, mind, breath, spirit. But then, as years go on and you learn more and more, you start to realize that it's an attempt at a definition. And as you may know, some of the yoga teachers that have brought yoga to us say that yoga can't be explained. It can only be experienced.
Yes.
And I'm starting to understand that more and more. Like yoga is maybe not to be defined, but, more to be experienced, more to be described. So I would say, and then maybe you can, give your perspective, but I would say, this yoga, it's a philosophy and it is a way of life and it is a system of health. And it's really some of the ultimate intentions is to help us be more connected to our true selves, whatever that means for us. Some people may say connected to something greater. It is a spiritual practice, not a religion. So it's definitely not a religion. However, there is this spiritual component, meaning connection to whatever you want to say it is, right? Like universe or your true self or source or light or universe. Or another, if that doesn't sit well with people, you could even say yoga is this, it's a path to like connecting to your true purpose or meaning in life. And then there are many, many different paths to do that. So what we know, what you and I know and what we're learning is the path of, there's different names and different lineages, but the path of the 8 limbs, which is Raja Yoga, which there are things like movement and breathing and awareness practices and some mindfulness and meditation. That's all part of it. And then yoga teachings and philosophy. But there's other paths, there's the yoga of service. Mm-hmm. There's the yoga of love and devotion, which is another path. There's the yoga of knowledge, which is studying, the yoga texts. And so like it's a huge topic, and I don't think you and I can sit here and like define it, but that to give your listeners sort of this basic understanding, just in summary, I would say, it is a philosophy, it is a way of life, but it's accessible to people like you and I and to people who are listening by taking these techniques and these practices to ultimately help us find more peace and joy and meaning, and then ultimately to help with our pain. So
I think you covered it. Okay. I think you did a good job. No, it's beautiful. I think bottom line, it's an inner experience. Like you said, yoga is an experience. It is not a religion or dogma or anything like that. It is an inner experience that helps you to connect with your, whatever you define your truest potential, your true self or your true nature, whatever that is. Bottom line, it is your experience, your world, and it's transformation. It's very transformative. And like you said, it's a way of life. It's a lifestyle. And it's not just what happens on the mat. It's not what happens in the class. It's how do you bring the philosophies around yoga into everyday life, like you're mentioning, love, compassion, service, gratitude, just appreciating something bigger than yourself, so all of that to me is why I practice yoga, and I just kind of weave it into my life in that way, because I just know how it makes me feel, and it makes me a better person. And there's nothing wrong with that. However you choose to do that, it makes you just a better person, and your experience on this earth so much more pleasant, because we all know there's no shortage of suffering.
Well, yeah. And then the word suffering, I mean, that's in some of the yoga texts, that's a word that comes up in one of the yoga sutras. And one of the intentions of yoga, which might be a nice segue into what we're probably going to talk about soon here, which is yoga can help us, since it helps us maybe be more connected to our truest self or potential. It can then help us provide more clarity and gain deeper insights into understanding our suffering. And then that can help prevent future suffering. And that's that one yoga sutra, right? Yoga helps to prevent future suffering. Yeah. And that's kind of the work that we're trying to do as healthcare providers is help people prevent, future suffering, or we're helping them with their issues. And then we can scale back a little bit and take more of an accessible view, meaning, okay, let's get into some language, maybe because we're kind of going deep into the big philosophy. So let's go into now, okay, the lens of looking at, well, what does that mean for me? And, trying to help with my pain. Like, do I have to be this, go deep into philosophy? I mean, that's part of it, what we're saying, because we want to honor the roots and the true meaning of yoga. But then also we can pick these different techniques and these breathing techniques and movement and ideas and some mindfulness. And that in and of itself can help people who have pain to help gain deeper insight into their pain and maybe help reduce some of it and help them move better and function better.
Right.
So that, I like to kind of just say, okay, this is what we've been learning, but then, because I want to, like I said, respect yoga and what it truly is. But then also kind of scale back and say, well, how can we make it now accessible to
right
people who are listening?
So what you're saying, it's not just flashy tights and power workouts, right? It's not about the asanas all the time. They're important, but it's just a piece of yoga to help quiet the mind, to help connect that deeper inner experience. It's just a modality. It is not, and I think, and from what I understand, what I learned in my yoga teacher training is asana really meant to find a comfortable, steady posture, or seated posture, to be able to sit still and find comfort in stillness.
Right. Yeah, that full expression of asana. And I really do butcher the Sanskrit language, so I always apologize for that. But the full expression is stiram sukham asanam, which means the stiram is the steadiness, like you talked about, find that steadiness and strength, but sukham with ease. So steadiness plus ease. And then asana means, like you said, to sit. So yeah, it's interesting. And I think that ties in nicely with what we try to help people with when we're trying to move. Like, we need the right amount of strength and stability and steadiness, but also with not too much tension. We need the letting go, and we need the ease, and that we need that efficiency of movement. And that's just that right effort.
Yeah.
That we talk about. And
that's right.
And then that's part of yoga philosophy. That's one of our teachings. And yoga philosophy is moderation and not wasting energy and being, finding just that right spot. And that, it's really cool when you start to bring in the philosophy into movement.
It's balance between effort, like you're saying, and ease, essentially, in life, not just in physical movement, but also in your entire, how you live your life. Can you find that, like you're saying, that happy medium between effort and ease? The space in between the breaths.
Yeah.
The space in between the breaths. So this is a wonderful segue into, okay, so this is a beautiful philosophy and this is a beautiful practice. How can we use this practice to help, or how can someone use yoga to help with persistent pelvic pain, or pain in general? It doesn't have to be in the pelvis, but particularly since that is a passion of ours, working with those that have pelvic pain, how can we use this practice with them, and how can it benefit them?
Yeah, so I think if we look at, first of all, just all the different aspects of our existence that influence pain, that's a nice place to start. So since we know from our current understandings now of pain, that so many things can influence our pain. So how we breathe, how we move, our thoughts, our emotions, the context of the whole situation. So our, how we're managing stress, even our relationships, the environment around us, like all these different things. Then when we look at yoga and some of the practices that yoga offers us, we start to kind of connect the dots and say, well, wow, if all of these different aspects of our existence have the potential to influence pain, then we can use all these different aspects of our existence potentially to help change our pain. So whether it is, pelvic pain or otherwise. So yoga techniques and practices, so we have things like breath, and we can have these different awareness or breath awareness practices, first and foremost, to help us first just be aware. That's key. And then regulate. So we can just first be aware, which is different than now changing the breath. So you first have to be aware, is your breath, are you holding it? Is it rapid, shallow? Is there tension in the breath? And then learning some of these yoga breathing practices to help calm the breath, which can then influence the nervous system. It can influence the body tension, which again all feeds back into the pain experience. So through breath, but also through movement. And it's not just about, okay, this particular pose necessarily like mechanically or anatomically, but how are you approaching the movement or the pose? And that's part of the yoga philosophy again. So how do we, what are our thoughts and our beliefs, and how are we breathing? How are we approaching it? Like the movement, like are we doing it with judgment and harshness towards ourselves, or are we doing it with some sort of compassionate, like self-compassionate approach? So things like that. How we move and what we think about the movement and how we breathe in the movement, like that can all affect the nervous system and again, pain. And then we can go on and on. And so then there's the mindfulness part of yoga and the different meditation practices. So we can do just a meditation in and of itself, which might be focusing or concentrating on, it could be anything. It could be some sort of an affirmation, or it could be focused or concentrating on a breath practice. It could be focusing or concentrating on maybe if you're moving, it could be like a movement meditation. So you're focusing on maybe bringing your awareness to visualization or a certain part of your body as you're moving. So we can combine, breath with meditation, with movement. So all these different yoga practices can help. Do you have anything to add? What am I missing?
No, I think my teacher, we kind of just went over this yesterday in meditation class. So I study Buddhist philosophy, and we were actually studying the function of meditation, which is a mind. So what we learned yesterday was meditation is a state of mind that functions to make our mind peaceful and happy. It's a single pointed focus on a virtuous object, which essentially is something that is pleasant, like love, compassion, gratitude. In that sense, anything can be a virtuous object, really, if it makes your mind peaceful and happy and calm. So, you can meditate all day, every day. Really, it doesn't have to be crisscross applesauce all the time, which is the formal way to meditate, which is good as well. But you can also take that into your daily life. So I just wanted to chime in and talk about meditation.
Yeah, which is part of yoga. Like one of my little, I wouldn't really say pet peeves necessarily, because it doesn't bother me, but it's just something that I'm passionate about to share the message is when we always hear yoga and meditation. You hear that phrase, yoga and meditation. But it's kind of redundant because meditation is part of yoga. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. So what you were doing yesterday and learning about, that is part of yoga.
Right. Could you chime in a little bit about so stillness and postures, and sometimes some postures can bring up discomfort in our bodies or emotionally for us. And let's talk about how yoga can really help, with that. What does that do in terms of more of a transformation when we're able to go into a posture and hold stillness within that posture, but also experience everything that posture is there to show us?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I could see us going deep into philosophy here too as well. Wow. So I might start with let's start with the fact that people with pain, we want to be able to recover function, and we want to be able to recover the movements and the things that bring us joy, or the things that that are meaningful in our lives that we want to do again, right? Some sort of activity. So whoever's listening, if you think about maybe some things right now that you're not doing because of your pain that you'd like to get back to. So one of the first steps, first that we talk about often is, calming the nervous systems and, just getting to a safe space to help, like I said, calm and decrease that threat to the system, to help potentially reduce the pain. And that's great. But that's step number one. So the next thing that we need to do is also challenge the system. So we need to find ways to maybe push the edge a little bit And pushing that edge could be really anything like you just talked about. It could be sitting with discomfort, whether it's mental discomfort or physical discomfort, but pushing the edge, again, whatever that means to people. And so yoga offers this practice, or offers different approaches and different philosophies to help us navigate how we can approach that edge safely. So different ways, I mean, there's so many different ways and it depends, but one way that we do it, like in the pain care yoga, so that's with Neil Pearson and the program that I teach as well. I'll disclose I do teach in that program. But one thing that we teach, we have guidelines, so there's no hard fast methodology, but some of the guidelines we do, and these guidelines are based on yoga teachings as well as what contemporary pain science is telling us. So one of the things we do is that we kind of approach the edge of that discomfort. And then we ask ourselves, do I feel safe? Or will I be okay later? And that's important, just to start some discernment there. And that's where the yoga comes into. So then the self-inquiry. So there's that self-inquiry of, okay, I'm at the edge. Do I feel safe? Will I be okay later? And that's really key, because if you don't, we already have an issue, because then that's going to play into the nervous system and the threat and the danger. So that's the first part. And then from there, we monitor and see if we can monitor the breath and the body tension and keep the breath and the body tension calm. So these are where the yoga practices come in and the techniques. So if we have learned, or we are learning, to be aware of the breath, to be embodied and aware of the body, and also with yoga practices, practicing these techniques of, okay, now we're aware that the breath is tight, or that the body's tight, or the thoughts are tight. Can we now use these yoga practices to calm the breath, to calm the body tension, to calm the thoughts, or find that equanimity? Right? And so now we keep the breath calm, the body tension calm, and monitor the pain. So we're not ignoring it, and it could be the physical sensation or the anxiety, whatever edge you're talking about here. So I'll just back up. So we do want to monitor the discomfort, right? And then we also monitor the thoughts and the emotions. So in summary, we get to that edge of discomfort. We ask ourselves, are we safe? Are we going to be okay later? If we think, okay, I think I can do this, then check in with the breath. Hey, let's see if we can regulate it. Can we calm it here? Can we regulate the body? Are we tensing up because we're afraid? Yeah. Are we starting to brace and guard? Ooh, okay. Can we learn to release that a little bit? Do we feel safe enough to let that go and learn the techniques we've learned in yoga to let go of that body tension? And at the same time, monitor this discomfort and monitor thoughts and emotions.
Right. And I think, Shelley, what you're saying too, or what I hear you saying, is that the person who is experiencing this during the practice, it's a sense of self-control. It's control, essentially. Like you're giving back to that person, saying, as you practice this, you are actually using strategies and techniques to feel more control of the situation, that you have a sense of autonomy with your own body and your sensations. And it's not this chaos of, flipping your lid and I have no idea what to do, which is like, trying to put the brakes on black ice instead of just letting go and easing with that black ice, right? We want to just put the brakes on it right away, and then we freak out and we're not making good decisions. But through this practice, one will experience just more space to approach a situation, whatever situation is causing discomfort, with more clarity and a solution-oriented mind.
Beautifully said. That's exactly it. That summarizes it. So we first need to be aware in order for that process to start to happen. So awareness, and then the discernment, which the yoga practices can help us discern, and then regulate. You're talking about, that self-regulation. And then that helps, to gain that deeper insight into the suffering. And then the inactive part is what you were talking about, the solution part. And, and then just helping us, what action do I take? And it could be to stop, so you and I aren't suggesting to people that it's always about, let's keep moving through this. And,
right.
The solution may be, to back off a little bit, or let's choose a different action, or it could be to move on. So, but what you said there, I think summarized it perfectly.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm humbled. Thanks. If let's say someone is completely new to yoga and they're hearing this for the first time, what would you recommend? What would be their next step to dip their toe, so to speak, in the water?
Well, let's see, so many options. So it depends on what your interests are. There are some, if you want to read, there are different resources that you can, read about. Of course, I'll send links that people can look into, like some that I think people would be interested in, like my website, there's resources, my YouTube channel, Neil Pearson's paincareu.com is good. And then my website, physioyoga.ca. So there are different resources you can start to look at for reading, and then also video practices. So Neil and I have some nice ones, Overcome Pain with Gentle Yoga. And then I have the pelvic health practices on Vimeo. So you can start to dip your toes. They're gentle, both my practices and then the ones I do with Neil. Pretty much anyone can follow them. There's awareness practices and breathing and meditation, mindfulness, and then they go into some gentle movement. That said, if you are suffering from some different issues and pain and conditions and you're not sure, and you might need some guidance from your healthcare provider, so they're not treatments, so just be clear with that. And then other things like I do highly recommend finding someone in your area. So reach out to either you, so whoever's listening, reach out to you because different people. Reach out to me. I know a lot of different people as well who are healthcare providers who also integrate yoga, or yoga therapists or yoga teachers who work closely with the pelvic health physical therapist or with other healthcare providers. So it takes a little bit of navigating, but start to just look and research, ask questions. I think that's the biggest thing. If you do find, let's say, a yoga studio in your area, or you can go online and Google in your area who's doing yoga, you start to read, how do you feel? What's the feel you get from the website? Look at the training. Are they trained to help people with issues? There's accessible yoga, teachers out there. And it's a good question, and there's a lot of different answers. But, I would say, to recap that, you just reach out to me and I can help you look at different resources to read, videos to watch, and then also other people to find in your area. Yeah. Right. Would you add anything to that?
No, I think that was wonderfully said. Honestly, you just have to start somewhere, and it might not always be a right fit, but hey, you had the courage to try and know that just because you had a so-so experience or it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, it probably just wasn't a good fit, whether that's the instructor or the time in your life or, whatever it is. There's so many variables, but yeah.
Yeah, my hand up. I would say I just thought of something. So another thing that you can do is call. It's that simple, but call the studio. So let's say you want to start taking a class. Shop around and call the studio and see if you can talk to the teacher. And, in my experience, the studios that are really inclusive and accessible to people that maybe have persistent pain, or that need more of an adaptive kind of yoga, those studios, you'll know as soon as you talk to them, they'll be willing to speak with you, and you can tell them about yourself if you feel comfortable. And then, you get a sense versus some studios may not be as accessible to you in those populations, which is fine, but then that wouldn't necessarily be as safe for you, because maybe they don't offer as many modifications and that. So just shop around and talk and tell people who you are, what your needs are, and that might help as well.
Great advice. Thank you, Shelley. Great advice. Because it can be quite daunting when you're like, yoga and the whole, stereotype of yoga that it's got to be this, you got to look perfect and pretzel yourself in a certain position. No, it could look sloppy. The life is sloppy. It's okay,
Yeah. And there are yoga therapists out there. So that's a whole other topic of conversation. But there are more and more people who do yoga therapy. So they're, yoga teachers that are now going deeper into using yoga as a more one-on-one individual approach.
Yeah.
So if that's interesting to you, you could even find someone who maybe is more trained in working with people one-on-one, and maybe are more trained in working with people with pain. So that, there's so many different paths, and it can get overwhelming, but. Right.
And use us as your resources, guys.
You can contact me. I'll help you find someone in your area.
Yeah. And I started to do, that's what I do now with after doing my yoga training. I incorporate all the concepts of yoga into a session, but individually based, certainly, so it's really customized and it's an experience. And most people love it. I mean, once you get into it, they just, just breathing alone, I think, and just giving that person space, holding space for that person just to rest, is quite profound.
Yeah. And I mean, in a perfect world, an ideal world, I do admit that I would recommend that everybody, if you could see someone one-on-one.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, for a long time or anything, but just to get a few of those sessions, so you get that one-on-one attention. Now, not everybody has the luxury of doing that, and there may be nobody really in your community that offers that. So I know that's why I don't say that right off the bat, because that's just not realistic for everyone. But you might be surprised, whoever's listening, you might have someone just down the street who's, a physical therapist or some sort of rehab professional, or maybe even a pelvic floor therapist who's integrating yoga.
Yeah.
Like that. And you could have a few one-on-one sessions. Or like I said, you may have someone down the street who's a yoga professional who works side by side with a pelvic floor physical therapist. Right. And there you go. You have a beautiful team right there.
Oh, yes, yeah. It does take a village, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It does take a village to support one another and recover. I do believe recovery is possible because one's potential is limitless, honestly. That's what I believe anyway. But speaking of breathing and getting into that yummy state of calm and peace, do you think we have time for a couple of minutes of guided meditation by you?
Sure, I have time. Do you? Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I love that. And I'm sure everyone else would love that too. You're in for a treat.
Okay, great. So we can you want to just do a breath awareness?
Sure.
A short breath awareness. Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet so that you can see how practical maybe it can be in your own life. Okay, so here we go. So find a comfortable position. We say that a lot, but really take a moment. I'm going to give you some time here, or you could even pause this. And it doesn't have to be seated. You could lie down on your side, on your stomach, on your back. Just take a moment to find a position that makes you feel relatively comfortable and safe, and like you can sit there for a few minutes. And we will just bring the awareness to our breath. So you don't have to change it. You don't have to do anything to it. Just notice it. Notice the rate, the pace. Notice the length of the inhale compared to the length of the exhale. Notice any qualities. So if the breath feels rigid or bumpy or maybe smooth and soft. And try not to judge or analyze, just notice. And notice if there is a space or a gap between the inhale and exhale and inhale, or if it's one smooth, continuous motion. And again, you don't have to change anything. Just notice, what does that feel like in between the inhale and exhale? Notice the depth of the breath. And then bring your awareness to the nostrils and just notice the breath entering and exiting the nostrils. Notice if you're breathing more through one side of the nostril or the other. Or maybe you can even tell the temperature of the breath. Perhaps it's a little more dry and cool on the inhale and a little more warmed and moistened on the exhale. And then bring the awareness to how the breath moves your body. Maybe you notice some of the more obvious areas. And then maybe some of the more subtle areas. Or even a sense of energetic flow, maybe higher up in the head, or maybe even down into the pelvis or the pelvic floor area, the legs, the feet. So don't think too much or analyze, but just a general overall sense of how that breath is moving in the body. And even the energetic flow, if that makes sense to you and if it's accessible to you. And if not, that's okay too. Just go back to how the breath is moving more obviously in the air, in the body. And then just briefly before we close, I'm going to just guide you to a longer, smoother, softer breath. So we've left the awareness practice, and just to see if we can get into some regulation, which means now we're actually trying to manipulate the breath. So just make the breath a little bit longer if you can. So not deeper. You don't have to do anything too crazy or vast. Just a little bit longer. So when you inhale, it's almost like you're sipping the breath easily. Taking your time, being patient. And on the exhale, it's like you're lingering in the breath. Just let it last. There's nowhere to go, nowhere to be. And cultivating that sense of patience and even the sense that just this is enough. It's a long, smooth, soft breath. If you can make it just a little bit smoother, a little bit softer even. If it starts to feel anxious or effortful, then just back off and do what you need to do to bring a little more ease and a little more peace to your rhythm. And then taking a moment to just adjust and wiggle around. And if you want to return your breath to normal, or maybe that pattern feels quite easeful for you and you want to stick with it, take your time. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them and send a little gratitude towards yourself for that practice. It's not about doing it right or wrong. And in fact, if you noticed it was challenging for yourself, or if you noticed your mind was wandering, and that's actually really great because you were aware and you were able to just kind of bring yourself back. So yeah, just practicing the self-compassion piece as well, and knowing that it's not about how good you did. It's just the fact that you at least took some time to participate and get centered. And thank you for that. I hope it was valuable. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope listeners enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, Shelley. That was just yummy. So yummy. Sometimes you just don't realize how you're feeling until you tap into good observations, like,
yeah. And the cueing, like I tried to keep it simple. So I really just stuck with the breath, and then we did a little bit of the body at the end. Mm-hmm. But the breath is really a nice, it's a nice way to notice to give us a conscious awareness of the state of the whole physiological state of our body, like you said. So you've been doing this for a while, so you were able to just connect with breath, and it gives you a whole sense of how you're doing in the moment. And sometimes for beginners, we don't get there right away, which is fine. That's not what it's about. But with time, you just start to, even just go to that breath and just be aware, and it just kind of brings everything in, as far as the general overall state of your thoughts. And you can kind of, okay, I guess I was really analyzing and I was worrying about that one thing. I didn't realize I was lost in thought, or the emotions. So you can start to tap in with breath awareness practices, just what we did, can even tap into, oh, wow, I was feeling really guilty there, or I was feeling really jealous. I felt that, or angry, or joy. I was really feeling content and pleasurable. And then you just get a sense of realizing where you're at, which that's the place to start from, to then regulate. So it's just something so simple, that we don't even realize can open up to greater regulation.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And for everyone out there, I'll have Shelley was so nice to gift us the PDF of the pelvic floor awareness meditation for people with pelvic pain. So I'll have that attached as well. And you mentioned a lot of resources already, but I just wanted to also say that you offered a 10% off discount code for the videos on your website that you were talking about and mentioning, correct?
Yeah, so they're on, you can find them on my website if you go to the products page, but I can give you the direct link to Vimeo, so they're downloadable. So it's not a DVD, they're online. You download them. There's 2 different practices, and one is a 30-minute practice of breath, pelvic floor, awareness and breathing practices, and then gentle movement practices, the second part. So it's really to become aware of the pelvic floor, to try to relax it, and then also to move to help engage it. But it doesn't even have to be for people that have pelvic floor issues necessarily. Like, people enjoy them, everybody, men, women, and even people that don't have necessarily issues, but they are great for people with pelvic pain. And then the toilet meditation is on there as well. So.
Yes, I share that a lot. And to anyone who's worked with me, you've gotten this resource. So that's great. And I'll link that as well. So I'll link all of this yumminess to the show notes for this podcast. And I also wanted to mention, for all the clinicians and those who practice yoga, your new book that came out.
Yay!
Yes, Yoga, Science, and Pain Care. You collaborated with Neil Pearson and Marlissa Sullivan, who I'm also going to be interviewing for the podcast about polyvagal theory. Stephen Porges, she just did a wonderful paper as well with them, and that concept of yoga and the vagus nerve and all that. So Just yumminess. So thank you for putting this together. It's a wonderful resource for anyone out there. Please check out Shelley's book. It just came out hot off the press. And are there any other resources, Shelley, that you wanted to share before we?
Well, I'll just with the book. So yeah, the three of us co-edited and co-authored, and there's other contributors in there as well. So it's not just actually the three of us in the chapter. So shout out. There's a whole, I won't
shout
mention
out.
because there's a whole bunch.
Sorry for not saying everyone.
But you can, and other resources, I think we got it. Just check out my site, physioyoga.ca. Browse through it, the YouTube channel, lots of free stuff, my Facebook pages and stuff. I have, of course, a few of the paid videos. I think that's just probably the best. Because I have a lot of articles as well on what we've just talked about. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My website. Okay.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you so much for being on the show. And to all our listeners and viewers there on YouTube, in loving wellness for your pelvis, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to drsuzieg.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles on today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
3, 2, and 1.